First, I am Lauren Ryan. Nice to meet you. I am the founder and self-proclaimed chief marketing nerd of Coastal Consulting. We are a HubSpot Salesforce integration specialty firm. We are a platinum HubSpot partner and a Salesforce consulting partner, and we help teams across the globe manage their HubSpot Salesforce integration, whether that's installing it right the first time or fixing it when it goes really horribly wrong over time. So we're experts in this space, and we have a free course out about the HubSpot Salesforce integration that actually a lot of attendees here today have joined. Thank you for that. And that has been the precursor to these live events. So we have that training that's out there. It's 8 modules on everything from why would you choose HubSpot in the first place to a detailed step-by-step guide of how to get it set up correctly. And then, of course, manage sync errors like we're going to go over today. So today's agenda, we have 4 sections of today's training. First, we're in that right now, welcome and kickoff. Then we're going to go into intro to sync errors. What are they? Why do they matter? How do we find them? Kind of the 101 of sync errors. And then 3, we're going to solve 5 sync errors live today. I sent out some emails last week to get some feedback from y'all and had such an overwhelming response. So I really appreciate that, of all of the things we wanted to cover. And we got like 50 sync errors people wanted to address. And today we're going to have time for 5. So doing my best to help you with the time that we have. And then 4, we're going to talk about what comes next. So we are brand new to doing these training sessions. This is our first one. So again, thank you for joining. We have 3 more scheduled as of now. And based off of how those goes, this might be a regular monthly thing. So your feedback on how today goes is going to be so essential into if we continue to provide this service or not. And finally, this isn't a sales pitch. So just sit back, put your learning hat on. Super excited to share all this with you. So hopping into step 1. Who's with us today? We have people from across the globe joining, which is not super surprising because that's our customer base. We work with people across the globe. One of our biggest clients is actually based in Australia. So super excited to see all of you from whatever time it is for you. And if you're watching the recording, nice to have you here. As far as industries that signed up, we have people from tech services, computer software, finance and insurance, kind of across the board. So we're super excited to have you all here. Trying to keep this a little bit interactive. If you head to the polls section in this event hosting software, you'll see that we have a few polls of information on y'all. So what does your career look like? How involved are you in the integration today? And how would you rank solving sync errors? Like, how does that typically go for you? How confident are you in it? So would love to see y'all's input on who you are and how you're feeling about this. It'll help me kind of guide the level of information that I give. So excited to have you guys here. Again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such an honor to build this thought leadership community around the HubSpot Salesforce integration. And so it's really exciting to see the offering continue to grow as we add these live trainings. So diving into section 2, what are sync errors? So there's really a broad spectrum of how people respond to sync errors in the HubSpot Salesforce integration, with one side of that being they completely ignore them, they move them all to archived, so they stop getting notifications and they never really check them. To the other side of it being a very urgent, like the sky is falling concern whenever they have a sync error. Neither of these are appropriate reactions. We want to fall in the middle, where we have a regular, healthy concern about about sync errors popping up, and we address them on a case-by-case basis, but they're not an overwhelming need to drop everything and run to your sync errors to solve them every time there's a new one. So what a sync error is it's a property automation or rule that's preventing a record from syncing in the HubSpot Salesforce integration. And that is one record. So it's not breaking the entire sync. It's not causing the integration to stop entirely. It's just one record that's not syncing. So it's not an error impacting all of your records. How does a sync error get created? A sync error is when there is a data quality issue between HubSpot and Salesforce, meaning whatever HubSpot's trying to send to Salesforce or vice versa can't be sent because of the parameters you've set. So like most native integrations, HubSpot and Salesforce are connected by an integration user. An integration user is just a Salesforce user that has a certain set of permissions and limitations around them. So whoever is that integration user between HubSpot and Salesforce is controlling what HubSpot's able to do, update, see, etc. in Salesforce. And so a sync error is saying, hey, there's a communication issue within the bounds of that integration user. So most people, when they install the integration, give the integration user system administrator access, meaning they can do everything in HubSpot, everything in Salesforce. But if you're using selective sync, you'll likely have more sync errors because there are permission issues with that integration user, meaning they can't see and do everything in Salesforce. So to recap, one sync error is not disrupting your entire database. It's not stopping the flow of traffic entirely. It's just one record that's having an issue. And sync errors are caused by a mismatch in data or permissions between HubSpot and Salesforce. If you are new to the integration, or perhaps you're not in charge of managing the sync errors for your organization, here's how you can find them. This actually will help you get in the right mindset as we go through the training today of like, how big of a concern is this for me? If you go to HubSpot and click on settings and go under integrations to connected apps and scroll to Salesforce, you'll be able to see your sync errors under the sync health tab. And so right here, you can see in this demo account, there's no errors, which is great. That's the goal for everyone. But if there were errors, you'd be able to see that in your HubSpot account. So if you want to go ahead and look at that to kind of set your mind on how important this is, go ahead and take a second to do that. While you are there, I also recommend subscribing to sync error notifications. Not a lot of people know about this capability, but if you click on manage notifications, you'll be able to subscribe to get notified every time there is a new sync error in your account. You can subscribe immediately, daily, weekly, and it'll just send you an email saying, hey, there's a new sync error that you need to address. If you are in charge of managing the integration, like you are the primary point of contact, absolutely subscribe to sync errors. Because if you don't get like an in-app notification in HubSpot for it. You have to go to the sync health panel. So it's really important to go ahead and subscribe. So HubSpot is helping you manage it proactively. So if you have integrated a different marketing tool with Salesforce, maybe Pardot, Marketing Cloud, you're probably not used to seeing a sync error panel like this. Something that makes the HubSpot Salesforce integration really valuable is that people are able to easily access the sync errors that's stopping the flow of traffic between HubSpot and Salesforce. Other platforms don't surface these errors for you. You just kind of figure out there is an error when stuff stops working or people are getting the wrong information. So the sync error panel proactively says, hey, there's an issue on this record, you should fix it. And being able to proactively see and address those errors is a huge value prop for using this integration in the first place, because every connection between a different platform is going to have errors. It's not a one and done fix. There's no way that you can fully avoid having sync errors ever, because humans exist and humans put data into platforms, and it doesn't always work. It's not always done correctly. So you need to stay on top of these and also be super grateful that HubSpot offers this where other competitors do not. So what are we looking at here? Here's a breakdown of the 8 categories of sync errors. We're going to go through each of these individually, but so you know, when you're looking at this, there are several levels of sync error information here. First is this 3000 number. The number up here in parentheses is how many sync errors you have across your account. So we know that we have 3000 in this account. This is very rare. Usually when we start working with a client, they have 20 to 50. This one was just especially out there with 3,000 errors. This is a cause for concern and you should get help. But whenever you have a lower amount of sync errors, you can usually solve them on your own pretty easily. So we know this is the total amount that we have. But what's important to note here is the number that's up here does not mean this is the amount of records that are affected. So the sync error panel shows you how many sync errors do we have overall, how many issues do we have to solve. And then the small text underneath each category shows you how many records are actually affected. So here you can see we have 38 association errors and 38 records are affected. But down here, we have 3,000 pick list errors and 5,000 records are affected. So what I like to do whenever I'm trying to figure out what sync error am I going to tackle first or which one am I going to prioritize, I look at the one that has the largest amount of records affected. So while this only has 2 errors, there's 170 records affected. So what's more important than the volume of sync errors is how many records are actually not syncing between HubSpot and Salesforce because of the errors. So keep that in mind. Now, let's talk through each of these briefly. The first sync error type is association errors. So whenever you have different objects connected in a platform, they are associated to one another. So when you're looking in HubSpot, you see a company record, and then associated, there are contacts and deals. So an association error happens primarily when an opportunity is syncing from Salesforce to HubSpot, and the account associated with that opportunity in Salesforce has not yet synced with HubSpot. So all an association error is saying is, hey, we can't get the full picture of this record because there's an associated record that's missing. So how would you fix this? You would re-import all records from Salesforce to refresh all of those associations, or just go to the specific account that this is associated with and push that sync through. So association errors are actually one of the more uncommon ones, because typically there's just an open flow of data between HubSpot and Salesforce, but this is one of the ones that would be more of an issue if you were using selective sync and your integration user did not have full permissions. The second category is custom code errors. There are two primary things that cause this to happen from Salesforce. One is Salesforce flows, and two is Salesforce validation rules. So in Salesforce, the flow tool is the equivalent of the workflow tool in HubSpot. It is their primary automation tool. While there are several, that is the primary automation tool in Salesforce. So a Salesforce flow is typically triggered when a record is updated or created. And so what this error is saying is whatever update you made on this record, it's causing the flow in Salesforce to not be able to operate. And so while in HubSpot, when a workflow has an error, it just puts it in the workflow and says, hey, there's an error. In Salesforce, sometimes when the flow can't run, it shuts the record down entirely and says, hey, you can't save this until the flow can actually run. So if you're a user in Salesforce and you're trying to edit it, you'll get the same error message that says, hey, the flow can't run with this information. So the way we would solve that is either change the data we're sending over from HubSpot or update the flow in Salesforce. And that's pretty much how any sync error is solved. You either fix it in HubSpot or you fix it in Salesforce. But most of the time, you have to figure out a way to fix it in HubSpot because your Salesforce admin has set up your Salesforce environment in a specific way and won't make those changes. So what I'm going to try to show you when we do the sync errors is how would you solve this if you could change it in Salesforce? And if not, here's how you work around it in HubSpot. So keep that in mind as we go through these. Next is a validation rule in Salesforce. On each object in Salesforce, the admin can create a certain code that says this data is required in this format, or this data is required when this is true. So a good example would be a lead status and an unqualified reason. So let's say you move your lead to lead status is unqualified, then an unqualified reason is required. So we might write a validation rule that says, if lead status is unqualified, then require an unqualified reason. And so if the data that HubSpot was pushing to Salesforce violated that validation rule, you'll get this error that says, hey, we can't save this until you fix this data formatting or what have you to meet the qualifications of that validation rule. So those are the primary two. There's also one on the screen that says missing contact ID. This is an issue with your Salesforce Apex code that's not causing like leads to convert into contacts correctly as far as a task association. That one's really out there, so don't really worry about that. You would definitely need to go to your Salesforce admin if you had an issue like this. This one you can't solve in HubSpot. The next category is duplicates. The challenge with the duplicate sync errors is this does not give you an accurate picture of the volume of duplicates that you have in either of your accounts. These duplicates are specifically the duplicates that are preventing a record from being created in one system or the other. It's not the amount of duplicate records you have in each system. So you'll need to tune into a later training to learn more about that. But just know these are the specific sync error duplicates. They are not the count of duplicates in HubSpot or Salesforce. So there's two types of duplicate errors that you'll see in the integration. One is duplicates found in HubSpot, and two is duplicates found in Salesforce. The first one, duplicates found in HubSpot, means we can't push this to Salesforce to create it because there's a duplicate. Duplicates found in Salesforce means that this can't be created in HubSpot because there's a duplicate. So whenever you click through these, you either merge in one system or the other, and that's how you would fix them. The next category is permissions errors. So like we said earlier, whenever you have an integration user, that's where the permissions for HubSpot comes from. So you can see the integration user in your account, and if they are a full system administrator, They typically have permission to do everything, and it's not a big deal. You shouldn't see many of these. But if you are using selective sync, you will likely run into quite a few permissions errors. And all that means is your Salesforce admin has to tweak the capabilities that your integration user has. So they might not have access to a specific property, and marketing really needs data from that property. So they need to make that visible in Salesforce. Pretty much any issue that you have with a permissions error, you're going to have to solve in Salesforce, and you can't work around it in HubSpot. The only workaround in HubSpot would be to not update that field. So remove it from the field mapping or something like that. So you're not even trying. But if you actually want data, there isn't a way to fix that in HubSpot. You have to update the permissions in Salesforce. I will say one of the most common issues that people who aren't using selective sync still occur or still have is the insufficient access for task. Even if you have the system administrator profile, you need to give the integration user access to the task object and the field type on the task object. So fun tip, give that to your Salesforce admin. You need access to the type object if you're going to sync activities between HubSpot and Salesforce. The other ones, these you're only going to see with selective sync. So next category, we are on category 5 of 8 here, is the pick list category. This is the one that gives the people the most headaches. This is the most common sync error you're going to see. Pick lists in HubSpot and Salesforce play together, but not always great. They're not a proactive syncing field, essentially. So in Salesforce, these are pick lists, and HubSpot, these are called drop-down select properties. And whenever you add a option to that drop-down field in HubSpot or Salesforce, it doesn't automatically create in the other system. So we're going to need to refresh fields in the integration or manually add them to one system or the other. That's one reason that this would throw an error. 2 is state and country properties. Those are a big one that will cause issues if you don't get ahead of them. If you're using state and country pick lists in Salesforce, you need to be using those in HubSpot as well to avoid sync errors. That's a process. We've got some content on that too of how to do that. But that's important in a big pick list area you're going to see. The other ones come from the ability that Salesforce has to have inactive pick list values that HubSpot can't see, are active or inactive. So an inactive pick list value error means that you're no longer allowed to use that value in Salesforce, but HubSpot doesn't know that. So whenever you're using the HubSpot Salesforce integration, it's a best practice to not use inactive pick list values. You have to delete pick list values and replace them with an active value whenever you get rid of them. So we'll walk through how to solve those, but each of these have a different solution. You either need to get rid of your inactive values, fix your state and country properties. For inactive owners, you need to reassign them to an active owner. So pick list errors are the most hairy and the least easy to say, oh, this is how you solve all of them. These are really on a case-by-case basis. The next category is field mapping errors. I don't have any examples here because you really never see this one. Field mapping errors typically come from the mapped fields in the actual integration. You can see the warnings of the sync errors, and I'll show you that when we go into the demo. But there aren't really mapping errors that show up here. So this would mean that the data types that are mapped between HubSpot and Salesforce aren't mapping correctly. So on to the next one. Property value errors. This is the second most frequent error aside from pick list errors. So this means that the data type in HubSpot in this field is not matching the data type in Salesforce, or there's some other data input like mismatch. So string too long is a really common one. That means that the amount of text or characters in that field in HubSpot is not allowed by Salesforce because the text limit is smaller. So let's say you had a 10 character limit field in Salesforce and you're trying to sync something that's 15 characters long from HubSpot, you'll get the string too long error. Missing required value, that just means that it's a required property in Salesforce and you're missing a value in HubSpot. Whenever you're using the HubSpot Salesforce integration, a big thing that you're going to want to check is what are your minimum required properties to create a contact, an opportunity, a lead, or an account in HubSpot or in Salesforce, and make sure you're capturing that data in HubSpot, because if you're not giving Salesforce the minimum data it needs in order to create these records, you're going to see a lot of these missing required value errors, because you're not going to be able to create these records in Salesforce because you're missing the minimum requirements. So make sure you keep like a tight eye on what your required properties are. for creating records from integrations, and keep in line with your Salesforce admin on if they're ever changing that. Because sometimes if you don't, you'll see all of a sudden that HubSpot can't create a lot of records. And that's because there are now more requirements and we're not giving Salesforce the data it needs. So finally, the last category is other. And like most things, other is just a bucket that they don't know what to do with otherwise. So all sync errors are technically just error messages from Salesforce. And so the way that these are categorized is HubSpot knows which bucket to put these specific errors in. But this other bucket, they don't know what to do with. And typically the errors that you see in this other bucket have to do with Apex in Salesforce, which is the underlying code that keeps Salesforce running. And whenever you hear like Salesforce has unlimited customization, a lot of that has to do with being able to edit Apex, which is their underlying code. So if you ever have an error in the other bucket, it likely has to do with Apex, and you, like, I would say like 10 times out of 10 have a dedicated Salesforce admin, they need to handle this one. It's likely really far out of the HubSpot admin's depth. So that's because it's dealing with underlying code in Salesforce. So just send these on over and don't even worry about these if you're just on the HubSpot side. In the Salesforce side, these are going to be super custom to your database or like your Salesforce instance and how you have it set up. So again, there isn't like a one size fits all to other. This just means it's a Salesforce code that's being thrown that HubSpot can't categorize otherwise. Okay, so there's the 8 types of sync errors. So what we're going to do now is solve 5 of them. In case you're wondering, there is a recording of this, so you can go back and watch each of those again. I know that I talk kind of quickly. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears and solve 5 sync errors that I've recreated in our demo account. I reached out last week to get some questions and errors that you guys are currently dealing with, and I got such a good response. So thank you guys for helping me put together the content for today's session. And again, with that, don't worry, I don't have any of your information showing here. We're not using your sync errors, and I'm not pointing out who sent them. I just simply recreated them in our demo account. So we are now seeing 5 sync errors. Quickly, while we're here, just some things I've already talked about. This is where you can find the sync errors. If you're going to subscribe to sync errors, you should go to manage notifications. 1 second. Gotta love 2-factor authentication, huh? So you can subscribe to sync errors. Let me disable screen sharing real quick. And then also, I want to show you the field mappings. So we're going to take a quick pause really quick while I turn my phone back on in order to log into HubSpot. Let's see. Thanks, Ophelia, for saying this is super helpful. I appreciate that. And happy that you guys are getting value from it. Okay, and we're back. Okay, so subscribing to sync error notifications, like I said, you can do instant, daily, or weekly. And then for those field mapping errors that don't normally get surfaced here, you can see those under each object. If you go to property mappings and look at status, you can see the field mapping issues here that essentially say, hey, this is a different type of data, or this is mapped elsewhere, or what have you. There's different types of errors. The good thing is you can click into this and it will show you what those errors are. So all of that aside, let's get to solving. So we're going to start with our custom code error. This custom code error, as you can see, is a field validation rule error. Here in the sync error solving screen, there's a few different elements. One is the error type, the error details, the affected records, and when this was first detected. These were all detected yesterday when I set this up for today. And under affected records, you can see the specific contact records that are having issues. This is super helpful because you can easily click through to see them in HubSpot or Salesforce right from this panel. So you can go into the contacts and see the error for yourself, which is really helpful. So for this first one, it's a field validation rule, which is, like I said, in Salesforce, you can create those validation rules to then require a certain format or data entry order. So here we can see the error details first name required for this contact. So I'm going to open them in HubSpot and look at the record in Salesforce. If we go here, we can click View in Salesforce. And this is how I'm going to determine if they're a lead or a contact. You can do these in several different ways. You can see this in several different ways. This is just a quick and easy one to see if it's a lead or contact, because while HubSpot contacts do sync with Salesforce leads and contacts, validation rules are set individually. So you can have a validation rule for a lead that you don't have for a contact, which is why using those two objects can get even trickier than you already know it is. So the way we're going to find this is we're going to go to Setup in Salesforce and go to Object Manager and look for the lead object and go to Validation Rules. So here's all of our validation rules for the lead. And the way that you figure out which one is causing this error is look at what the error message says. So first name is required. If we look at these error messages in Salesforce, we can see first name is required is the error message for this validation rule. So if we click in here and look at this, we'll see, okay, it says that if first name is blank, throw this error message. That means that we need to have a first name for this record in order for it to sync. So there's a few ways to fix this. One would be to add the first name in HubSpot, which will make this error go away. Or you could update this validation rule. A way that you update the validation rule to exclude HubSpot is you would add a line that says, and if user ID is the HubSpot integration user, don't run this validation rule. I would use that on a case-by-case basis though. So excluding the running user, which would be HubSpot, from a validation rule is valuable if it's something that a sales rep should be giving Salesforce. So let's say we needed call notes. Like we see that they had a call with them. We need call notes before they can save this record. HubSpot shouldn't be bound to that requirement because HubSpot didn't have the call. They don't know the data. They can't do that. So putting the excluding the running user from updating this is really valuable. But for requiring a first name, that's a reasonable expectation of HubSpot to be able to provide the first name. So it's fine to for this specific error to just update the first name and click resync. And now you can see that that is syncing. And question the validation rule under Object Manager. So under Setup, you would go to Object Manager and find the object. So this is the lead object. And under each object, validation rule shows in Salesforce. So you click validation rules. We're looking for that error message, and here it is. Let's see. Now, as you can see in HubSpot, that one's solved. So 1 out of 5 sync errors is good to go. We're going to move on to the next one. Also, we have a poll just to see what you guys thought about how we solved that error. So go ahead and check that out and let me know if it was helpful or not. Again, this is a learning process for us as this is our first training, and I want to make sure that it's super valuable moving forward. Next, we're going to hop into pick list errors. Like I said, these are the most common types of errors. So I wanted to spend the bulk of our solving time in pick lists to help you guys work through those in your account. So we have 3 different types of errors here. We have restricted pick list, mismatched state or country value, and again, restricted pick list. So let's just work through these one by one. In this first one, we have restricted value for product interest. If we open in Salesforce, these little fields here will open the actual field in these 2 systems. So we can open the HubSpot property in product interest, and then under the lead, we can pull up the property product interest. So here you can see the side-by-side of these pick list options in Salesforce and these drop-down select options in HubSpot. What you'll notice here is that green is an inactive value in Salesforce, but it still shows as an active value in HubSpot. And the challenge there is HubSpot does not recognize inactive values in Salesforce, right? So the reason it's throwing this error is because Liza in HubSpot has green as her product interest. And as we saw in Salesforce, that's not an active value. So there's a few ways you can go about changing this. The easiest one is going to be updating this in HubSpot. However, if it's a product interest property, you wouldn't want to change it from green to blue to get the error to go away, right? Because now we're lying about what her interest is. So what you're going to need to do in Salesforce is figure out what to do with this property. So if this is a product line that you used to carry, and we still want to know who was interested in green, even though they're not anymore, you probably want to activate that and just keep tracking it. If the green product line is now just a subproduct of the blue product line, then you could go ahead and merge it. So you would pull up this inactive value in Salesforce, delete it, and merge it into blue. So we'd say green is now a subset of blue. Let's go ahead and delete that inactive value and set it to blue. Again, if you are a HubSpot admin, you likely need your Salesforce admin support with this part. But we move the inactive value. It's now a part of blue. And you want to do the same thing in HubSpot, where you select these options and merge them into blue. So now the greens are going to be merged into blue, and we have a long-term fix for this because the inactive value is gone in Salesforce. If you do not remove the inactive value in Salesforce, it will just keep coming back into HubSpot. And HubSpot, unfortunately, can't update back in Salesforce with an inactive value, even when Salesforce is the one who sent that inactive value to HubSpot. Confusing, but it's just how it is. So cannot have inactive values in the integration. And you'll see since we updated her to blue and then merged blue, the sync error is now done. So we are now at 2 out of 5 sync errors solved. Again, I know I'm going quickly. There will be a recording. Let's head on to the next pick list error. This one is a mismatched state or country value. You'll see here that the error is on the state property. I'll show you that these sync errors start from your settings. They don't start from the individual record. So if we go to contacts and look at the state and country settings, you'll see here that we say the pick list is disabled in Salesforce for state and country. But that's not true, because in our Salesforce account, if we go to look at state and country pick lists, we can see that they're enabled. I can tell that they're enabled because the option to enable them is grayed out and the option to disable them is there. So I know that we have pick lists in Salesforce, but we're telling HubSpot we don't. So probably shouldn't lie to our system if we want it to work well, right? So what we would want to do is change this to the pick list as enabled in Salesforce. And if we have custom values in that pick list, you would want to say enabled and customized. Most teams just have it enabled and there aren't custom values, but you want to be honest with HubSpot as to what's in there. So you would say, yes, we're using a pick list in Salesforce, and we either want to send HubSpot's values or match Salesforce values. I recommend matching the Salesforce values. So whenever it syncs from HubSpot to Salesforce, that gives you a good chance of them transforming the data into what Salesforce is going to receive. But there's a lot behind this. So again, got some content on our blog for that. Now, back to the issue at hand. That doesn't necessarily solve the issue for this contact, because if we open them in HubSpot, we can see that the state country issue we're having is that it's mismatched, not that it's not the right format. So we can see that their state is Alabama and their country is Canada. So the reason that we're seeing this error is that in Salesforce, there is a certain number of states that are allowed per country. So Alabama is only a viable option if the country is the United States. They don't allow you to put Alabama as the state for Canada being the country. So the way that you need to fix this in HubSpot is to clear this value. So we would say, okay, there's no state region because in this account, we don't have any states for Canada. We just have Canada. Sorry, Canada. Usually you would put states, but just for how I have it set up, there aren't any provinces right now. But since I've cleared Alabama as the state, you can see that this sync error is solved. If you are not keeping a super close eye on your state and country from HubSpot, or it doesn't matter to you, HubSpot does automatically collect data on state and country whenever a form is submitted. It is IP, city, country, and state. And so this is saying from the IP that they submitted this form, this is their location data. I like to use this to filter in HubSpot because it's not self-reported. It comes from their IP address, which of course, if they're using a VPN or something like that, yes, it will be skewed, but usually it's pretty reliable. So I like to use that. If you don't need city or country data from your contacts, one, don't collect it, but two, you can change the mapping so Salesforce always wins. So that way HubSpot's not going to be sending any data to Salesforce it doesn't accept. So to do that, you would go to the property mappings and find state region. And you see where it says prefer Salesforce. That's what we want to use. And for country, we can say prefer Salesforce too, or we can say always use Salesforce, meaning HubSpot can never update that. So A few ways to solve that. If state and country don't matter, marketing's not collecting that for Salesforce, go ahead and just make prefer Salesforce there. So if there is a sync issue, it just takes the blank value from Salesforce and moves on. You could also create a HubSpot workflow that says, if country is Canada and state value is known, just clear the state property. So there's a lot of ways you can go about solving the state and country issue. For this example, we solved it by just removing the state, since Canada doesn't have any available states in this instance. Next, pick list. This is a different restricted pick list value, but the reason is different. This does not have to do with an inactive pick list value. Fun and tricky, I know. So here we can see that the fix in HubSpot is to remove the restricted value. The fix in Salesforce is to unblock the value. Great, that's super clear. So if we open up Mildred and look at unqualified reason, we can see that the unqualified reason is timing. But in Salesforce, in order to have an unqualified reason, the lead status needs to be unqualified. So accounts typically run into this issue whenever they have a lead that they've worked in the past, they have unqualified them, said they're not qualified, we're not going to work with them right now, and it's because of timing. And then later that lead comes in and reconverts and we go to work them again, and their lead status is now working because they're reinterested, but unqualified reason still says timing. And so because their lead status is no longer unqualified, that property is causing a sync error with Salesforce, meaning this record isn't being updated. So the fix there is to change them back to unqualified, but we don't want to do that, right? Because they're not unqualified, we're working them. So what we actually want to do is clear unqualified reason. So if you only have access to HubSpot, the way that you do this is you create a workflow that enrolls them whenever their lead status is not equal to unqualified and unqualified reason is known, and you just clear the value for unqualified reason. Why? Because that's what happens in Salesforce whenever this is the case. As you can see, we fixed that and now this error is gone. But if you look at this record in Salesforce, because this is a dependent property, we can look here and see lead status is working and unqualified reason is unknown. If we change them to unqualified and click save, see that we're not requiring it right now, it's just an option. But if we click competitor, great. Now we see that they're unqualified and the unqualified reason is competitor. If we change them in Salesforce back to working, this property automatically clears. So that just didn't sync through to HubSpot in this case. So we would just build that automation in HubSpot as a fail-safe to make sure that if it's set to unqualified, the unqualified reason is wiped. So it's already happening in Salesforce because this is set up as a dependent field. What does that mean? That means that those unqualified reason values are only available if the pick list for lead status is set to unqualified. Again, this might be more focused towards our Salesforce admins in the audience, but if you look at the lead status here, you can see the controlling field for unqualified reason is lead status, which means that these are only an option in Salesforce if unqualified is selected. So in Salesforce, if we move it to new, it just wipes that field. So in building that automation in HubSpot, you're just mirroring the functionality Salesforce has to avoid those sync errors in the future. Okay, one more to go. So if we refresh, we see our sync errors are now down to just one, and we have a property value sync error. This one we talked about before. It says the error is that the string is too long. That means that the favorite color in HubSpot here is too long for Salesforce. If we want to open that property in Salesforce, we can see what the actual limit is for string too long. We can see that color is a text property with a length of 5. That's kind of stingy, so we're probably just going to increase that. So we can see here that the contact, Dana, is having an issue with favorite color. And if we go look at their favorite color, we'll see what the issue here is. Magenta is more than 5 characters. So the best way to fix a string being too long is just to increase the volume or the count in Salesforce. So I'm going to change this to a 20 character field by updating the length in Salesforce. And then if we go back to Dana and click resync, we'll no longer see that issue. If you have more data to collect, I would always recommend making the field longer in Salesforce. The challenge there is if you're getting some like dirty data in HubSpot, then maybe not. So like for sometimes on like a lead integration with Facebook or LinkedIn ads, you might have a property mapped incorrectly. So it would be sending a text field to your like email property or something, and you would get that string too long because the data in it's not actually the right kind of data. Then I would just erase that field or delete the record if it's full on spam. But if it's a reasonable use case like this one where we could just increase the length, that's typically the easiest way to solve that. As you can see, this one has now been solved. And if we go back to our sync health panel, we will see that go away soon. There we go. Now we have no errors. So snaps to all of us. Let me take you back real quick to our presentation. Okay. So we are now at sync error 0, which is our version in the integration world of inbox 0. And oftentimes it feels better because you have to work harder to earn it. So congrats. That's the end of this training. You have completed 1 of 4. I'm going to look at the questions in just a second, but just so you guys know, our next one coming up is managing duplicates in the HubSpot Salesforce integration. That was our second most requested session, and I think that one will fill up very quickly. It's a huge issue with the integration, and we're going to show you how to solve it. We'll then go in to talk about inclusion lists and selective sync in a deeper dive in our next session, and then leveraging campaigns in HubSpot and Salesforce after that. So registration for this next one will be live after this one is over. But let me hop in the questions real quick and see if I can clear some things up for y'all. Okay, agreed with Ken. Always check with your Salesforce admin before changing validation rules. Never change that. Saying that, assuming that you are the Salesforce admin also. Don't just do that willy-nilly. Let's see. You can use the workflow to copy IP state value to the state field. What you're going to want to do with that is make sure the formatting is correctly. Sometimes IP state comes in as the full spelling or the abbreviation, whatever it is. Sometimes it's the inverse of Salesforce. So you're going to make sure whenever you do that you're copying the right format. Let's see. Under questions, is there a queuing mechanism between Salesforce to HubSpot? It seemed to get an error message and then it disappears. Yes, there is a 15-minute sync between HubSpot and Salesforce. So every 15 minutes, it refreshes and see if there's any field updates that need to sync between the two. So that would be the queue, is wherever you fall in that 15-minute time frame. There are some that trigger an instant sync. There's a blog on our website actually about sync triggers. So go ahead and look that up, coastalconsulting.co. But yeah, it's on a 15-minute sync. If I have pick list state and country fields in Salesforce, is there a way I can set up state and country fields in HubSpot without deleting all my contacts, making the change and re-uploading? Yes, you don't have to delete your contacts. You have to clear the field value. So what you want to do is go ahead and take everyone who has a state and country value and export those state and country values with the HubSpot record ID in the file. Select everyone in HubSpot. Once you have that export, clear the values for state and country, change it to a pick list, and then re-upload. So you're not deleting your contacts. You're just clearing the state and country field to convert it to a pick list. And I highly, highly recommend everyone do that, to have a pick list in HubSpot for state and country. Having a free text field becomes a disaster very quickly. Okay, it looks like that's all the questions. You're going to receive an email after this, the survey, just asking you how I did. Please, please, please take like 2 minutes to answer that. Like I said, we have 3 more sessions coming up, and I want to make sure these are super valuable for everyone that's coming. This is what I do day in, day out, but sometimes I'm a little bit too technical, or maybe I'm not going deep enough. So please let me know so I can make this a lot more valuable for our next one. And feel free to join us on October 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern to be a little bit nicer to our West Coast people without excluding our friends in Europe. And we'll be covering managing duplicates in the HubSpot Salesforce integration. Final ask for me, if you enjoyed this session or had a good time, please share it on LinkedIn. Let people know, come to the next one. Let people know I was in a great session with Lauren at Coastal Consulting. And finally, feel free to message me. I would love to know if you guys have questions or if this brought anything else up that you want me to cover in the future. So thank you all, and have a great day. And again, thanks for coming.